Welcome and thank you for checking in at the Inner Game of Change podcast, where I focus on exploring the multi-layers of managing organizational change. My guests cover a diverse number of critical topics to enable effective and sustainable change in the workplace. My name is Ali Jamal, and you're listening to the Inner Game of Change podcast. My guest today is Dr. Nadya Zhexembayeva, an international TEDx speaker, a scientist, entrepreneur, and author specializing in reinvention and resilience. The Queen of Reinvention, as dubbed by TEDx, Nadya delivered keynote talks to over 100,000 executives, including 4 TEDx talks in Slovenia, Austria, Romania, and the US. I am grateful to have Nadya sharing her thoughts on sustaining digital transformation. Well, Nadya, thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining the Inner Game of Change podcast. I'm honored to have you as my guest today.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And where are you now? You're in America?
I'm in the United States, Columbus, Ohio.
Great. And what are you doing nowadays? We're going to come to, because you are a TED speaker in many countries and you've written books. You are a scientist, you are an entrepreneur. I just want to ask you a question. Is there anything you cannot do?
Oh, plenty. I'm not very good at skiing. Generally speaking, physical activity is not my strong pursuit. I'm not very patient. I'm one of those people. We often think about starters and finishers. I am a starter. So I need to have a very strong finisher next to me, always working. And there are plenty of things I cannot do. Fantastic. But in terms of what I do these days, there are 2 sides of my work that I'm taking most of my time. One of them is the educational side. I'm the founder of Reinvention Academy, and we teach executives, consultants, and business owners around the world how to reinvent their businesses, their products, their services, so that they can not just survive this crazy, disrupted, uncertain world, but actually thrive in it. And the second thing, I have a consulting business since 2007, and we work with companies around the world doing exactly that hands-on.
Great. You've written a book, your recent book, the Chief Reinvention Officer Handbook, How to Thrive in Chaos.
Yes.
Have I got that right?
Yes.
Okay. At some stage in the future, I would love to have you on. We're going to talk about that. Today, though, where you touched about a starter and a finisher, I want to talk about a couple of things linked to each other. So one is the digital transformation move that is happening around the world now, and whether or not it was the urgency around it was created out of COVID, or was it already brewing and then COVID kind of created the urgency around it? And the other piece, Nadya, is how do we sustain and embed and reinforce that particular digital transformation within the workplace? And the reason why I want to talk about the sustain and energy, as you just mentioned, I do believe that some of us are good starters and some of us are good completers, but we need both of those capabilities for a successful change. Let's just touch on the first point, which is what are your thoughts around what's happening now around the digital transformation in the workplace?
Well, for me, digital transformation is one of many transformations that are happening simultaneously around the world. You can also talk about the talent and the future of work transformation, the entire blow up of the whole concept of being employed and what it means to have loyalty and talent at work. We're talking about transformations technologically, so automation and everything that happens around automation, and many, many other disruptions that are happening. So for me, digital is a kind of warm-up exercise for many other disruptions and massive waves of change that are ahead of us in the coming years and decades. In that sense, is it an expected change? Yes. We've seen it coming for many years. And very often is something that in some scientific work is called innovation theater. When a company is not really making a move into new territory, but pretending it's playing, it's putting on a theatrical performance as if it's transformed, but actually there's not really much change inside the company. And I want to say in some companies that I've seen, transformation started long before COVID, but in others, COVID actually exposed the theater going on around digital and forced companies to come face to face with the reality that unless you are creating digital infrastructure solutions and ways for you, your customers, your suppliers to work with you, it will be a very difficult game to play in the future.
So you're thinking, you're using the analogy or the metaphor of a theater. Mm-hmm. And usually what happens in theater is a make-believe. And that is the difference between what Simon Sinek calls the finite game and the infinite game. So some organizations are thinking long-term and some of them are thinking because everybody's doing it, we should be doing it. Is that the sentiment?
Very much so. It's been very hyped up topic. Every now and then we have certain topics in management that become the jargon, and every conference is dedicated to this topic, and every CEO feels the need to do a big thing on digital, and there's always a showcase of something that manifests and confirms that we are in step with the times. The reality, of course, is you should transform, and if you should reinvent, and you should change things in your company and in your nonprofit, in your career, in your community, if it actually increases the level of life and thrivability in your system. If you are doing it for a check mark, you are taking valuable resources away from where they're needed, and you are spending them on a pretend play that is not helping you, not helping your customers, not helping your employees, and not helping any other stakeholder.
So basically what you're saying also is that sometimes in the rush of trying to look like we are doing something, we're creating more harm than good.
Unfortunately, and I'm not at all judging or blaming. I'm victim to the same thing.
Just observing, yeah.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to have people around you who are not afraid to say truth to your face. I've had many cases in the last few years where members of my team were, calling me. They were naming what I was doing, where I was following the hype, or I was doing things because it's fashionable or because everyone is doing it, without real deep logic and true value created from that particular change.
Yeah. On a side note, I actually had a discussion with another guest, and then we talked about after 2 years of disruption, global disruption and a messy disruption that impacted the workplace, home, relationships, our kids' lives. The last thing we want to hear about after 2 years of being tired is the workplace telling us about another transformation. Is the timing right, or does it jar with the current level of emotion that is actually happening around the world?
I understand the sentiment. I have an 18-year-old daughter who is in last year of school here in high school, and watching her and her classmates making sense of this new world and how much suffering and confusion this has been for a lot of different kids, including kids with disabilities, including kids who are in desperate need of social networks and so on. Looking at employees, looking at companies that are overstretched and burnout, I understand the pain, and I understand the pain of my own family and my own employees. The challenge, however, is that we see absolutely no evidence that the speed of change, the scope of change, and the severity of change is going to slow down. Whether it's COVID-19, new regulation, new competitor, new technology, new environmental disaster, new economic recession or inflation, anything goes. It will be something. And it's very clear in the data. The book you mentioned is one of the places where we collected a lot of data on the speed and the depth of disruption. And I'll give you just one number out of many numbers that we cite. One of them is the life cycle of a typical business model. And in the 20th century, a typical business model's length was somewhere around 75 years. That meant I could graduate from college, enter a company, work in that company my entire life, retire from that company and never see one reinvention. Today, our data, and we do this service every 2 years, so 2020 data suggests that the median life cycle of a business model is not 75, it's only 6. And it's shrinking rapidly, which means that it doesn't matter what is the cause of disruption. There are many confluencing or congruent forces that are speeding up the world, but there is zero sign that it's slowing down. And there are many other groups that are researching that. One of them, of course, is the Singularity University that shows again and again in multiple different dimensions of data that this is not going to slow down. So the answer to your question, whether you like it or not, change is going to happen. The only choice you have is, are you going to fight it or are you going to make the most out of it? That's all.
Which takes me to the notion of creating resilience or change resilience in the workplace, because the reality of the situation is that it's not going to go away, and therefore change adoption, change management as a practice. So first of all, we're going to have to, lift our game as change practitioners, because change is not going to slow down; it's going to go faster, and therefore the velocity will be there. And there will be lots of conflict, so nothing is going to be smooth sailing. Everybody's talking about agile change management. In terms of building a resilient culture for change, I just want to pick your brain around what do you think the building blocks to build a culture like that?
Well, in our line of work, we developed 6 pillars of reinvention. And here, the biggest difference, before I say anything else, that I have to drive home is the shift from treating change, transformation, reinvention as a project to treating it as a process. Okay. If you look at the history of change management, absolute majority of schools of thought going all the way to Kurt Lewin and coming back to 90s and wonderful work around change by Dr. Kotter, and coming to this century with new models, including Atkar model by ProSci. All of those models treat change as a project. It means there is a beginning, there is a middle, and there is an end. Originally, it was unfreezing, changing, refreezing. There are increased number of steps across the stages, but overall, the idea is that this is a project. That's why there's been so much friendship between the field of change management and the field of project management. The problem with that, however, is the speed of change we're facing right now. And our survey suggests that 60% of companies today have to reinvent every 3 years or less, including 16% that have to reinvent every 12 months or less.
Wow.
There, you cannot treat change as a project. It's no longer this one big event that you put out and there's a finish to it. It's more like taking a shower. Yeah. If I don't take a shower on a regular basis, I begin to stink. Same with my company, same with my product lines, same with my process approaches and so on. If I don't reinvent my company on a regular basis, it will begin to stink. And that means it cannot be treated as this new thing every time. You don't take a shower and treat it as completely new experience every time, and you need to learn all new processes, set up new tools and resources, figure out how it's going to be done. No, you have a system, and it has to be a system. And the system that we've so far worked on, it has 6 pillars. There's 3 pillars that are more immediate in nature, And there's three pillars that are more mid to long-term supportive in nature, but all six are crucial. The immediate ones are ability to anticipate change. And this is where you use the tools of strategy, foresight, and methodologies around scenario planning and so on. Anticipate change. The second one is designing change. And this is where we use design thinking, we use Scrum Agile, we use other methodologies, appreciative inquiries here. And third is implementing change, the finish line, getting it to completion. So those three things. And here we use a lot of Scrum Agile. We use other methods in project management to get it to completion. So anticipating change, designing change, and implementing change in a flow that allows you to notice a potential disruption before it hits your company and prepare for that disruption in a thoughtful way before it's necessary. Yep. These are the immediate three. There's other three that have to be in place, and those include reinvention mindset, reinvention culture, and reinvention ready systems. The last one, for example, is one of the most dreadful ones, things like budgeting. You want to change all you want, but if you have an annual budget, you will not change fast enough because your budgeting system will stop any new initiative necessary. So you have to reinvent your budgeting system, make it more dynamic, make it more adaptive on a monthly basis, and so on and so forth. So for me, the crucial part is changing your thinking about change altogether. It's no longer a project, it's a process. It's no longer something that happens every 10, 15 or whatever years, and it's this massive endeavor. It's something that has to happen on a daily basis. And if that is the case, it needs to get the seat at the table equal to finance and sales and marketing and operations. And that's been my message to change managers worldwide. You have to get your seat at the table at the C-suite. And I have not seen that many change managers at the C-level. That's why Chief Reinvention Officer is my big agenda. I want change managers at the table.
Yeah, and that's great. Which we're going to come, I might drop in there the question around the future of change management, but I'll park it for now. I want to stay on the idea, I think pillar number 3 was about implementing change. Mm-hmm. And because of the velocity and the speed, what are the things that we need to be aware of to embed and sustain the change? Despite the fact that we are in a very dynamic environment, and sometimes, the beginnings and ends blur into each other.
They do. To answer the question of how can we improve our success rate at implementation, and by the way, the data there is very, very depressing. The latest research by Boston Consulting Group says that 75% of all transformation efforts fail. So we are desperately bad at implementation. We are good at starting. We are not very good at finishing reinvention and bringing it to the place of reaching the goals that we set out to reach. So here, first and foremost, it's crucial to understand the context. We come from the era of long business cycles. That's where most of management theory was born. That's what we teach in business schools. That's what we awarded with our KPIs and our promotions and bonuses. All of it is about long cycles and stability. And in that world, ideas were very rare, but execution was assumed to happen on its own. So the vision was that as long as we get idea right, the execution will take care of itself. Mm-hmm. And it happened because we had very little access to information. There was no Google. Just to research how to get from Melbourne to Columbus, Ohio would take forever and ever. Just researching the route, let alone actually making the trip and making it useful. True. So at that point, ideas were the golden thing. That's why they were represented by the special tokens and images. And the big thing was idea and access to information. And implementation could take care of itself because we had time. We had long cycles. We could test out. We could, take our time and figure it out. Today, it's exact opposite. Ideas are commodity. You can Google tons of excellent ideas. And if they're not there, you can put a hackathon together and you will get tons of really valuable, well done, well researched, well justified ideas. It's the execution that is the difficulty. And because of that, we don't have capacity developed in our employees. This is not something we test at the entry when we are recruiting people. It's rarely a test we perform, how good you are at change execution. It's not something that we put as a required training course during orientation. And it's not exactly something that we use to promote our top managers. There are other things that we pay attention. Most of them are financial performance, not so much how well we are, how good we are at changing the organization. So in that sense, few things I already mentioned. Recruit people based on their execution capacity. Train people so that you develop execution capacity. Have processes designed so everyone knows how change happens. If I have an idea, what then happens? What's the pipeline looking like? In most companies, operational pipeline is very clear. You know what needs to happen from the raw material to execution of the product or service. From an idea, if you are in IT industry, idea goes through stages. There's coding involved. There's all kind of other testing happening. And then we have a product at the end. Almost nobody that we've researched knows what is necessary to push change forward, to produce successful reinvention at the end of a pipeline.
Yes.
So having clear processes, making them extremely known to everyone, train people in those processes, making sure they work like a clock. Those are the few things that are necessary to make change implementation a success greater than it has been historically in the last 30 years.
And I think the differentiator nowadays is that all organizations are facing the same challenges. There is no shortage of starters, entrepreneurs, but I think the differentiator will be for those organizations that look at change management as a responsible player. As you said, get a seat at the table. They have an input right from the beginning. But the second thing is that those organizations that focus on finishing and completing and sustaining the change. I heard a speaker, and I can't remember his name, he's an Argentinian thinker. He used a story, and the story is like Nadia, you and I in a forest, and then we're just walking, enjoying nature, and then all of a sudden there's a grizzly bear that shows up out of nowhere, and then start running towards us. And then, you'll be saying to me, come on, Ali, we need to run. And I'll be saying, hang on, I just need to change my shoes and put on a couple of runners. And you'll be saying to me, what's the point of runners if the bear is coming? And I said, no, all I need is to run a little bit faster than you. The bear will only catch one of us. And so the challenge, the bear and the monster is the same monster. And I'm passionate about you can get a load of dopamine in the completion of a piece rather than in the beginning of the piece. So those people who are dopamine junkies, completing a piece is actually far more exciting than starting it. And I like the idea that we need to look for execution capacities in our recruitment. I also think that organizations right from the start need to link the success of a project to the project director or manager, whoever they are, or the sponsor, to performance measures. So they need to demonstrate that after the end of the project that the change is being adopted, and there are stats and performance measures that can demonstrate that it's been adopted and people are comfortable with the change experience itself. That is not an easy thing to achieve.
Absolutely. And you see, again, I keep driving the thought down wherever I go, and it's very, very uncomfortable thought for many, that change is no longer just a project. It's a process that starts again and again. But just like a process of manufacturing, at the end of the manufacturing line, let's say you're manufacturing a car, there are specific measurable KPIs or OKR, objectives, key results, whatever system you use, it doesn't matter. But there are measurable metrics that show that you produced a good car, you produced it at the right cost, at the right time, with the right quality, design, and so forth. And yes, there's another car on the pipeline, and another car, and another car, and another car. But each car has to have metrics, and it needs to come out as a high quality car. And that's the vision I want you to have about change and reinvention in today's world. It's like a pipeline. It's like a production manufacturing facility where we're creating the next change and the next change. And we need to get as good at creating a conveyor as we did when it comes to manufacturing and really improving the quality. But that starts with treating reinventions as a basic literacy skill. Just like you cannot enter a business workforce today without basic Word or Excel or reading or writing or counting. Change and reinvention, basics of resilience, it has to become the foundational literacy skill that doesn't happen to few. That is just a no-brainer, absolute required for everyone. And that's what the mission of Reinvention Academy is, 1 billion people with those skills.
So would you see change capability as a capability that is required nowadays from leaders?
100%. 100%. There's no debate.
Yeah.
Either you're in or out. And the sad part for me, especially living through this last 2 years, is to see that the world is splitting in two. That I see people, and it's not about age or gender or any other demographic. It is all about the mindset, skill set, and tool set. I see people who are becoming more and more comfortable with change, as if they use this nonstop disruption, starting with COVID-19 and all the fallout of COVID-19. Digital was one of them. Workforce changes is another one, and on and on and on. But they're using it as a gym to build their muscles even stronger, to come out into a place where thriving in uncertainty is an immense competitive advantage for them. And then I see people who are falling so far behind that I start to worry very seriously if they will ever be able to catch up. Because the resistance mindset is exceptionally strong. And once you are falling behind, your skills are not as good, your tools are not updated, you are falling behind, you're off the wagon, then the bitterness sets in, the hopelessness, the learned hopelessness sets in. And then it becomes harder and harder to dig out of this hole. And it's very hard to watch.
From your observation, what do you think some of the things that you observe that you think derail sustaining change? Is it the impatience? Mindset.
Number one is the mindset. It's the belief system you hold.
Yeah.
So if you believe that change is something that happens very rarely, for example, you live in a very warm climate and it snows once in 100 years. Would you then have warm clothes in your house? Probably not. Would you know how to shovel snow or how to drive on ice? Probably not. Would you have spare winter tires for your car in your garage? Probably not. It's illogical. So if you think change is something that happens once in a blue moon, it's like the Great Recession, you probably are thinking, okay, it will get over, it will go over, I will buckle up, I'll tighten my belt, I'll survive, and things will go back to normal. So number one belief to change is the fact that change is no longer something that happens rarely. It's something that happens every single day. If not every single day, it's definitely every single week. The second belief that we test a lot in our executive education courses is the belief that change is a loss. This is experiment after experiment. We run them also in live sessions. And it's so painfully obvious that for most people, change is association with losing something or subtracting something rather than gaining something. And if you're sitting in that mindset, if you assume change is a loss, and assumptions are not backed by reality, they're not rational by design. If I sat with you and analyzed how much good came out of your past changes versus how much pain and suffering and loss, you probably would start noticing that actually there's a lot of things that have been gained in the process. But it is a mindset problem. And unless we start shifting the mindset, almost everything becomes impossible. But here's good news. We are born as excellent change managers. We are born as reinventors. Reinvention is our birth skill. A baby, if the baby is physiologically well, does not need a bonus to start walking.
No.
Does not need an unfreeze stage to start crawling. We are natural at change when we're born. We're just educated out of it. And it's about regaining our natural ability rather than learning something we never learned.
Fantastic. Where do you sit in the scale of things? Are you a starter or are you a completer finisher?
I'm a starter. When we designed a healthy reinvention cycle in companies, we actually map out a team to make sure it's very balanced and that the two sides of the story have a lot of respect for each other. Yeah. Because the other side cannot complete anything without the other side. And I always tell the story of my parents. So I was born in the Soviet Union. I have a very, very Soviet family. And they spent most of their life in the construction industry. And my dad is a starter and my mom is a finisher. That means that almost any time I'm visiting them in Kazakhstan, something in our house is blown up. It can be a roof, the window, whatever. My dad is constantly changing something. If my dad was running the show without any checks and balances, we would have no house. It would have nothing finished. But if my mom was running the show, we would have a museum because nothing would ever change. So having the two of them in unison in a dance is exactly the beauty that we need in a normal, healthy reinvention cycle, and giving the other side their time to star on stage. There's a time for the starters to be the star, and there's a time for the finishers to be the star. And there has to be a lot of respect in passing the baton and supporting each other in the process.
These are good complementary skills. I suspect change empathy is associated with completion and finishing. So when you talked about your mom, immediately the word empathy, and I started thinking about my mom, they are more empathetic about that we need to give a little bit of time and care for something to be, to be embedded and to for change to actually happen. I'm not saying starters and entrepreneurs don't have empathy, but that probably not at the forefront of their thoughts. They get excited at the ideas and the prospect of the ideas.
It's a different kind of empathy, right? So they're empathizing with the potential risk of the future if we don't change.
Yes.
What kind of pain and suffering we will be in then. So it is, again, it's about having a lot of respect for both sides. And both sides traditionally hate each other. In a typical business, you know who is who. So in a typical company, the strategy, sales, marketing on the starter side, sometimes R&D, the manufacturing operations, risk management, accounting, supply chain is usually on the finisher side. And those two sides usually have very little respect for each other. And that has to stop. We have to learn how to truly, truly respect each other's roles. But different industries require different balance. So there are some industries that are harder to move. You need more starters because the finishers are actually well equipped and there's a lot of processes in place. And it's the other way around. There are plenty of companies where you need one or two starters and tons of finishers. And you need to understand your industry and be very, very nuanced in the developing the system that will work for your industry and for your company.
The reason why I started paying a lot of attention to finishing, because I was a starter always. And 2017, 2018, I did complete a marathon des Sables, which is 6 days, 6 marathons in the Moroccan desert. Wow. Yeah, it was a big deal. And they give you a medal, and the medal says finisher. And
oh my God, 6 days, 6 marathons.
But the principle of a finisher stuck with me, and then I immediately start thinking about how can I apply this to my practice and become a finisher, because everybody gets bored at the end, whereas I get excited at the finishing line. And that's where change can be classified as successful and positive or otherwise, or incomplete. I'm aware of the time, and are we coming to the end of the podcast? I'm loving this conversation, Nadya. What is your key message to us as change practitioners? I know you talked about a process. And how do you see our role evolving in the next 3 years?
The most important message that I have for entire world, not just change managers, is this new reality in which we either make change our friend, our constant companion, our somebody in IT industry said change isn't. So I got what you're trying to say. Change is not a bug, it's a feature. And I love that. Talking about our digital conversation, I thought that was so spot on. I said, yes, you got exactly what I'm trying to say. Change is not a bug. It's not a accident or a negative side of the current reality or some wrath of God or punishment from some secret society. It's just a feature of our new world. So using that as a resource, as an opportunity, as a part of a daily life is much easier and much more enjoyable and productive than fighting change or treating it as an annoyance that we need to deal with. And in that sense, I think change management as a profession has a choice. It's like a fork in the road. Either we claim our place as a fundamental new driver of business development and a role that is far from support, or we will become irrelevant. And the issue here is you cannot be a good change manager in today's world if you don't love business, if you don't understand strategy, and if you don't understand finance. And unfortunately, too often, I meet change managers who tell me they're all about people and all that boring stuff is not part of their thing. We're no longer in a speed of change where we can afford outsourcing part of the knowledge. In the middle of the battle, we have to be much more wholesome in understanding how the entire system of the organization works. And if we don't make this transition, we will become irrelevant. So that would be my message to the profession.
I love it. And I live by this every day. In fact, I'm actually just completing a project management, agile project management myself. Not that I want to be there, but I want to understand it. And definitely in terms of the finance, you always want to talk about change and the return on investment on the change. Different stakeholders would like to know about the dollar value and the impact on that. So you would need to be able to be articulate enough to talk about finance from a change management perspective as well.
Absolutely.
I am a big believer in that our discipline needs. This is why I said at the beginning we need to pick up our game. Getting a seat at the table is not easy, but it's not beyond our reach. We just need to demonstrate our value every day.
100%.
It's been a pleasure having you, Nadya, as my guest. I am honored and I'm inspired by this conversation for me, and I hope the listeners will get a lot out of this. I know I'm going to get you back to discuss your book, the latest book, the Chief Reinvention Officer Handbook. Until then, stay well and stay safe.
Thank you so much, Ali. It's been an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Inner Game of Change podcast. To know more about our guests and this episode, check out the innergameofchange.com.au website. And remember to subscribe. I can't wait to share with you the next episode. Until then, stay well and stay safe.